There's a reason Carl Jung kept some of his thoughts hidden, written only in private letters, personal notes, and unpublished essays. Not because they were wrong, but because the world wasn't ready to hear them. And maybe it still isn't. In his exploration of the feminine psyche, Jung found something deeper than cultural norms, something darker than romantic projections, and something far more personal than most men care to admit. He called it Anima, the inner feminine image that lives inside every man. Not just an idea, not just an aesthetic, but a psychic blueprint that shapes how a man sees every woman he meets. And here's the part most people ignore. If a man hasn't confronted his inner feminine, his mother wounds, his emotional imprints, his fantasies, then his anima becomes distorted. She turns seductive, manipulative, not in the women themselves, but in how he perceives them. He will chase women who mirror his unresolved pain. He will romanticize chaos. He will call it passion, and he will abandon himself again and again, just to feel alive. Jung wasn't attacking women. He was warning men, because when a man is unconscious of his anima, he doesn't fall in love. He falls into projection. He thinks she's everything he's ever wanted, but really, she's everything he's never integrated. The wild, the tender, the chaotic, the muse, all the parts of his own soul that he denied. He now tries to possess through her, but here's the twist. The more he chases that image, the more power it has over him, and suddenly, the women he's drawn to become sirens, beautiful, alluring, but impossible to hold, not because they're bad, but because he never saw them to begin with. He only saw his own longing. Jung wrote, "Every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, and until he makes that image conscious, he will search for it in every relationship, and be disappointed every time. This is why so many men are confused. One minute, she's everything. The next, she's unbearable. But the change didn't start in her. It started in him, in the collapse of the fantasy, in the disillusionment of the anima, in the moment the projection fades, and the real person begins to emerge. And that's where most men run, because meeting a real woman means confronting your real self, your fears, your unmet needs, your emotional immaturity, and most men would rather blame her than face the parts of themselves they buried years ago. But what if that pattern could end? What if projection wasn't the problem, but the invitation to wake up, to remember, to integrate? Because when a man brings his anima home, he no longer needs to chase it in the world. And that is where real love begins. Most men think they're choosing a woman, but in truth, it's often their trauma doing the picking. Jung saw this with frightening clarity. He noticed how men repeatedly fall for the same type, not because of compatibility, but because of unfinished psychological business. The woman who triggers his deepest desire is often the one who reawakens his deepest fear. That's not a coincidence. That's the anima at work. She doesn't just attract, she tests. She pulls him into emotional states he hasn't mastered. Jealousy, abandonment, unworthiness, possessiveness. And in those moments, he either blames her or begins the work. But here's the painful truth. Until a man understands his anima, he will be addicted to emotional highs. He will confuse tension for connection. He will seek the woman who makes him feel crazy in love, not realizing that chaos feels familiar, because it mirrors the emotional instability he grew up around. Jung wrote about the dangers of confusing the anima's spell with actual intimacy. He said that men trapped in this dynamic will endlessly seek muses, women they can project onto, idealize, chase, but never truly understand. And tragically, they miss the women who could offer them real love. Why? Because real love feels boring when your nervous system is wired for drama. This is why some men sabotage healthy relationships, not because they're broken, but because they've been programmed to equate safety with dullness. To them, peace feels unfamiliar. chaos feels like home. Until they wake up, until they realize the spark they keep chasing is often the spark of re-traumatization. Jung urged men to differentiate the anima from the actual woman, to stop looking at her as a savior or destroyer, to see her as a person, not a projection. But that requires something rare: silence, self-reflection, the courage to ask, what part of me is she activating? What wound is she mirroring? What emotion am I refusing to feel alone? Because the anima only controls you when you refuse to confront your own unconscious. Once you do, something powerful happens. The women you're drawn to begin to shift. You stop craving the unpredictable. You stop idolizing the unavailable. You stop seeking the chaos that once felt like chemistry. Instead, you begin to desire clarity, depth, steadiness, real connection. And it's not because the women changed. It's because you did. Your anima becomes your ally, not your master. She no longer seduces you into fantasy. She guides you back into wholeness. And from that place, you don't fall in love to feel complete. You love because you already are. Now, here's where it gets even darker. Jung warned that the undeveloped anima doesn't just distort love, it distorts your entire perception of women. When a man's anima remains in shadow, he unconsciously splits women into two categories: the angel, pure, gentle, nurturing, and the temptress, seductive, chaotic, dangerous. He can't see her fully. He doesn't know how, so he keeps swinging between idealization and resentment. He worships her when she fits his fantasy, then punishes her when she disappoints it. This is not love. This is projection. Jung believed that the male psyche, if left unintegrated, will project his own inner tension onto the feminine. He will blame her for the very chaos that's been brewing inside him. You've seen it. The man who says all women are crazy, but can't admit that he chooses chaos over and over again. The man who claims she's manipulative, but never confronts how he manipulates himself by denying his needs. This is the anima undeveloped, immature, inflamed, and when she takes the wheel, a man becomes lost in emotional storms he doesn't even understand. He starts mistaking control for safety, silence for power, sex for love. But here's the most dangerous part. The less you know your anima, the easier it is for others to weaponize her. Advertisers do it, politicians do it, and yes, some women do it too, because if you don't know what controls you, someone else will. This is why Jung emphasized integration, not to suppress desire, but to purify it, to burn away the illusion, to finally see clearly. Because when you integrate the anima, you're no longer thrown around by your emotions. You feel them, but they don't own you. You're no longer seduced by the shallow. You crave the soul. You don't need a woman to complete you. You want to meet her as a sovereign, grounded man, not a boy looking for a mother. That is the sacred masculine. And once it awakens in you, everything changes. You begin to recognize feminine chaos, not as a threat, but as an invitation to lead, to hold, to witness, without controlling or collapsing. The men who reach this level, they don't need to chase, they don't need to prove. They attract by presence, by depth, by the quiet force of a man who's met his shadows and is no longer afraid of hers. That's what the anima wanted all along, not to confuse you, but to complete you, not through her, but through your own inner reclamation. And when that happens, when the anima is integrated and the inner chaos stilled, you don't just become a better lover, you become a better man. Jung wrote that every woman is born with two distinct voices inside her. One is ancient, intuitive, and alive, the part that knows how to feel, how to sense, how to see without looking. This is her inner guide, her anima, the deep, inward, feminine force that holds her most sacred truths. The other is the mask, the surface, the social performance we call femininity. This is the part that learned how to smile when she wanted to scream, how to say I'm fine when her soul was aching, the persona. The trouble begins when the second voice, the performance, becomes the only one she listens to. See, Jung observed something quietly devastating. Many women don't realize they've traded their truth for approval, not because they're weak, but because they were trained to survive that way. From a young age, she's rewarded for being agreeable, praised for being nice, validated when she's soft, silent, and selfless. So she learns, to be loved, I must not be fully me. Jung said that over time, this division between the inward truth and the outward performance fractures the psyche. The woman feels confused, even about her own desires. She may appear radiant, confident, desirable on the outside, but feel hollow, chaotic, or resentful on the inside. And no one understands why. Not even her. This isn't just emotional confusion. Jung called it a disintegration of the self. And here's what makes it worse. Society rewards this disconnection. It glamorizes the polished, performative woman. But it fears the fully embodied one, the woman who knows who she is and no longer needs to perform for anyone. Jung said, a woman who hasn't integrated these two selves will keep experiencing emotional instability, not because she's dramatic, but because she's divided. The real her is buried beneath the persona she believes she has to be. And so relationships suffer. Intimacy feels unsafe. She'll keep running in circles, chasing love, then pushing it away. Craving freedom, but not knowing how to access it, because as long as she wears the mask, she's still invisible to herself. The integration begins the moment she slows down and listens to that quieter voice. The one she buried beneath the need to be enough. The one that whispers, you were never broken, just buried, and it's time to come home. Carl Jung made a startling observation. Most women aren't afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of being seen. Truly, deeply, vulnerably seen. And this fear doesn't show up as fear. It shows up as perfectionism, as control, as pulling away when things get too real. Jung believed that deep love, the kind that strips away pretense, threatens the very identity many women have spent years constructing. Because to truly let someone in means letting go of the role you've been playing. It means surrendering the performance. It means risking the truth, that underneath the curated confidence, there's still a part of you that feels unworthy. So instead, many women fall in love with potential. They chase emotionally unavailable men. They romanticize the fixer-upper. Why? Because there's no real risk of being fully seen, only the illusion of connection. Jung called this safe sabotage. You think you're choosing love, but what you're really choosing is protection. Protection from what? From being vulnerable, from being truly known, from being touched in the places you've learned to guard so well, even you forgot they were there. Jung said that until a woman becomes conscious of this pattern, she will repeat it endlessly, not because she's foolish, but because it feels familiar. The chaos, the distance, the yearning, it mirrors childhood wounds she never got to understand. She'll call it passion. She'll call it chemistry. But it's trauma, disguised as attraction. And the tragedy, the men who are actually safe, the ones who see her clearly without needing to fix or break her, they'll feel boring, too easy, uninteresting, not because they are, but because she doesn't yet believe she's worthy of peace. Carl Jung said that healing begins when a woman stops chasing mirrors and starts facing herself, when she no longer needs her pain to feel alive, when she realizes love isn't about being chosen, it's about being revealed. Only then can she open to a love that doesn't burn her, a love that holds, that mirrors, that awakens. But she must go first. She must make peace with being seen, not the version she polished for years, but the raw one, the soft one, the scared, sacred one. Because real love doesn't start when he says I love you. It starts when she can finally say without trembling, I see myself, and I'm still worthy. Carl Jung didn't demonize women. He decoded them. And one of his most compassionate, yet confronting, truths was this: not every woman who wounds you is wicked. Sometimes, she's just unhealed. The woman who manipulates you, who ghosts when you open your heart, who pulls you close only to push you away again. She's not always trying to play games. She's replaying her trauma, her fears, her unmet needs. Jung taught that the psyche is not logical, it's cyclical, meaning until we become conscious of our wounds, we repeat them. We project them onto partners. We reenact old stories. We chase safety in unsafe places. So when a woman sabotages something real, when she punishes kindness or distrusts love, Jung wouldn't say she's evil. He'd say she's terrified. Terrified of being loved. Terrified of being abandoned. Terrified of not being enough or being too much. And so she tests. She hides. She withdraws. She overfunctions. Not because she doesn't feel, but because she feels too much and never learned how to hold it. Jung believed that the feminine psyche, when wounded, becomes reactive. Not from malice, but from emotional overload. The same way a child cries when they can't find the words. This doesn't excuse abuse. It doesn't mean you stay. But it does mean you stop taking it personally. Because if you don't understand her wound, you'll make it about your worth. You'll think you weren't enough, that your love failed, that you're broken, when in truth, she was never taught how to receive love without seeing it as a threat. Jung said something powerful. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But here's the key: only if both are willing. You can't transform someone who's committed to their pain. You can't save someone still romanticizing their wounds. You can love, you can mirror, you can even walk beside them for a while. But at some point, you must choose yourself, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. Because being the container for someone else's chaos is not noble. It's self-abandonment. Jung's wisdom calls you to compassion, not codependence, to understanding, not self-erasure. So if you've loved a woman who couldn't receive you, who ran from your softness, who punished your presence, don't make it mean you were too much. Sometimes your light simply exposes wounds they're not ready to heal. Wish them healing, bless the lesson, and walk away knowing your love was real, your presence was sacred, and her inability to receive it was never your failure. Carl Jung observed something few dare to name, that many women, even the strong, intelligent ones, often enter relationships not to connect, but to control. Not in the villainous, overt way you might expect, but in the quiet, unconscious undercurrent of needing to contain something they don't yet understand. You see, Jung believed that the feminine psyche holds immense depth, intuition, emotion, chaos, creation. It is wild, fertile ground, and that much power can terrify someone who hasn't integrated it. So what happens? A woman, disconnected from her inner world, tries to manage her external one. Instead of diving inward to meet herself, she tries to manage the man in front of her. She sets tests, withholds affection, creates tension, just to feel something familiar. Not because she's cruel, but because in chaos, she feels in control. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This explains why so many relationships feel like power struggles, why a simple question turns into a fight, why deep conversations are met with defensiveness, why love feels more like negotiation than intimacy. Because beneath it all is an invisible war, not between man and woman, but between a woman and her own unexplored self. And you, as the man, become the mirror, the trigger, the placeholder for everything she hasn't yet faced. When you're calm, she'll say you don't care. When you're honest, she'll say you're attacking. When you're devoted, she'll say you're too available, because it's not you she's reacting to. It's the terror of being seen without control. Jung didn't judge this. He understood it. And he called men not to match the chaos, but to anchor deeper into clarity, not to fight for dominance, but to stand rooted in presence, because true masculine energy doesn't overpower, it doesn't chase, it doesn't fix, it sees without flinching, it holds without needing to be held, it loves without attachment to outcome, and in doing so, it offers something most women have never felt, safety without control. So if you're in a dynamic where love feels like a performance, where you're walking on eggshells, where honesty leads to explosions, ask yourself, is she meeting you or managing you? There's a difference. And if she can't sit with the truth of who she is, she'll always try to rewrite the truth of who you are. Let her go, not because she's evil, but because she's at war with herself. And until she surrenders to her own depth, she'll keep wounding anyone who reminds her of it. Carl Jung taught us one of the most painful truths a man can face, that the woman you love may not be loving you at all. She may just be reenacting her childhood, not consciously, not maliciously, but deeply and powerfully. You see, every woman carries an inner child, and if that child was abandoned or neglected, or shamed for having needs, then she won't know how to receive love. She'll only know how to test it. She won't trust peace. She'll crave drama. She won't believe in stability. She'll sabotage it. She won't accept your devotion. She'll provoke your distance. Why? Because deep inside, the little girl she once was is still waiting for her father to finally show up, waiting for someone to choose her, waiting to be seen, not for how she performs, but for who she really is. And when you come along, calm, grounded, real, you awaken that hope in her. You become a symbol, a second chance. But here's the dark twist Jung warned about. What she doesn't heal, she will repeat. Not because she wants to, but because the psyche always tries to resolve what's unresolved. So she'll unconsciously pull you into the same pain loop. She'll accuse you of being distant, even when you're present. She'll test your love by pushing you away just to see if you'll stay. She'll recreate the conditions of her trauma, because that's what's familiar. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, a self-destructive loop that feels like fate, but is really just an unhealed pattern playing out in real time. And you, the man, must see it for what it is. Not a challenge to fix, not a game to win, not a problem to over-explain, but a mirror to step away from. Because no matter how deeply you love her, you can't reparent her. You can't convince her she's worthy. You can't fight her demons for her. Only she can do that. What you can do is choose to break your own pattern, to stop falling for potential, to stop romanticizing dysfunction, to stop mistaking chaos for chemistry. Because when you heal, you no longer find validation in being needed. You find peace in being free. Jung's brutal truth: love doesn't fix wounds, it only amplifies them. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away before you become the villain in her childhood story. There's a kind of love that doesn't feel like love at all. It clings, it smothers, it panics when you pull away. At first, it flatters you. You feel needed, wanted, claimed. She calls you her world, her reason, her everything. But soon, you can't breathe. You begin to feel like a prisoner in a gilded cage, one where the bars are shaped like compliments, and the chains sound like I just worry about you. Carl Jung warned us about this dynamic, because when a woman hasn't found her own identity, she will latch onto yours. She'll wrap herself around your routine, your rhythm, your essence, and call it love. But it's not love. It's possession. See, when someone lacks a stable self, they compensate by fusing with another. This is not intimacy. This is dependency. And the most dangerous part, they'll punish anything that threatens that fusion. Your solitude, your silence, your independence, even your growth. Because to her, your evolution feels like abandonment. Your boundaries feel like betrayal. Your truth feels like a personal attack. And so she'll unconsciously begin to manipulate. Through guilt, through tears, through withdrawal, through sudden coldness when you don't act how she wants. Not because she's evil, but because she's terrified. Terrified that if you become whole, she'll be left behind with her emptiness exposed. Jung wrote that most human conflict isn't evil, it's unconsciousness. And in relationships, that unconsciousness gets acted out through control. She doesn't want to hurt you, but her wounds don't know how to love you. They only know how to keep you close, even if it means destroying the connection piece by piece. So what do? You don't argue. You don't explain. You don't try to fix her from the inside out. You observe. You detach. You remember who you were before she made you her oxygen. Because any love that demands you shrink isn't love. It's control wearing perfume. Jung reminds us, true union requires two whole individuals, not one person vanishing into the other. So ask yourself this: are you being loved, or are you just being used to fill a void? There comes a moment when the fog clears. You're no longer lost in her charm, no longer chasing her affection, no longer confused by the push-pull, the silent treatments, the emotional bait. You simply see her for exactly who she is. And in that moment, you don't feel anger. You don't feel hate. You don't even feel heartbreak. You feel relief, because the illusion finally dies. You realize that the love you thought you had was a projection, a story you told yourself about her, about you, about what love was supposed to feel like. But Carl Jung said it best: we are not what happened to us, we are what we choose to become. And when you awaken to that truth, you stop seeing her as a savior, or a soulmate, or even a villain. You just see a person carrying her own wounds, her own shadows, her own unprocessed traumas that spilled into your world. And you finally realize you don't need to carry them anymore. You don't need to shrink to be loved. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to rescue someone who refuses to rescue herself. You stop negotiating with ghosts, because the man you are becoming, he doesn't chase chaos. He doesn't beg for clarity. He doesn't sacrifice his peace for conditional intimacy. He walks away, not with bitterness, but with a quiet dignity, because he finally sees the brutal truth about the female psyche that Jung uncovered was never meant to make you hate women. It was meant to help you recognize unconscious patterns that steal your strength. It was meant to wake you up, to call you into wholeness, so that you no longer confuse intensity for intimacy, chaos for connection, or possession for passion. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to become conscious, and consciousness begins the moment you finally say, no more. If something stirred in you while watching this, don't scroll past it. You didn't find this video by accident, and these words, they weren't just information. They were a mirror, a quiet reflection of something you've always felt, but never fully named. This isn't about her. It's not even about the past. It's about you, and the parts of you that are ready to be reclaimed. Carl Jung taught us that healing is remembering who you were before the world convinced you to become someone else. So if you felt seen, if something in your soul whispered, yes, this, don't let the moment fade. Drop a comment below, not for validation, but to declare, I return, I reclaim, I remember. And if you know someone who's still stuck in a cycle of pain, share this with them. Sometimes a single insight can interrupt a lifetime of confusion. Subscribe, not because you need more content, but because your healing has already begun. And now, You walk with eyes open,